Welcome to Relatively Damaged by Damaged Parents, where destitute, abandoned, abused people come to learn maybe, just maybe, we're all a little bit damaged. Someone once told me it's safe to assume 50% of the people I meet are struggling and feel wounded in some way. I would venture to say it's closer to 100%. Every one of us is either currently struggling or has struggled with something that made us feel less than, like we aren't good enough. We aren't capable. We are relatively damaged, and that's what we're here to talk about. In my ongoing investigation of the damaged self, I want to better understand how others view their own challenges. Maybe it's not so much about the damage. Maybe it's about our perception and how we deal with it. There is a deep commitment to becoming who we are meant to be. How do you do that? How do you find balance after a damaging experience? My hero is the damaged person, the one who faces seemingly insurmountable odds to come out on the other side whole. Those who stare directly into the face of adversity with unyielding persistence to discover their purpose. These are the people who inspire me to be more fully me, not in spite of my trials, but because of them. Let's hear from another hero. Today's topic includes sensitive material which may not be appropriate for children. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as advice. The opinions expressed here were strictly those of the person who gave them. Today we're going to talk with Terri Kozlowski. She has many roles in her life: daughter, sister, mother, wife, grandmother, stepdaughter, stepsister, and more. We'll talk about how her and her sister were abandoned by their mother in Albuquerque after abuse and neglect, to then spend a significant amount of her life finding hope and learning to surround herself with safe people. Let's talk. Well, Terri, welcome to Relatively Damaged. We're so glad to have you here today.
Thank you very much, Angela. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So you came on to talk about a childhood trauma. And one of the things you said before we started the podcast is that you weren't just relatively damaged, you were significantly damaged. Tell us a little bit about that.
Most childhood traumas are traumatic, actual traumatic events, are something that we don't get over easily. And it's something that we carry with us because it ultimately takes away part of our authenticity. So I was a child of divorce. My parents were divorced when I was 8 years old. Unlike most divorces, my father got custody of my sister and I, two young girls. He was the first man in the history of Maryland to win custody of little girls from their mother. This was in the early 70s. They went their separate ways, and my mother ended up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. At the age of 11, I went to visit my mother with my sister. My sister is 11 months younger to the day than I am. Okay?
Wow.
So we were more like twins than we were older sister, younger sister. But I had seen my mother once between the time we left Maryland and the time we went to visit her in New Mexico. And that was when she went from New York to New Mexico and was traveling through. So we get to New Mexico. My mother's an alcoholic. We knew she was an alcoholic. She was in AA supposedly, and that was why we were allowed to go on this trip.
Right.
The first 2 weeks were fabulous. Some of the best memories I have of my mother occurred in those first 2 weeks. Then she started drinking. What we didn't realize was that she was also a drug addict now.
Oh,
so
no.
She was drinking and using, and I ended up going back into my codependent behaviors. I was fixing drinks and passing out drinks. And when they passed out, cleaned up after them, covered them up. When they were falling asleep or actually passing out, falling asleep was my term that I used. Mommy sleeping, not
Right.
that mommy passed out. So
Right.
those codependent behaviors that kicked on. And for me, they kicked on prior to being 8 years old.
But did you know at that point that passing out was not sleeping, and you just wanted to use that word because it made it okay?
I was protecting my mother. I
Okay.
couldn't wake my mother up, so obviously she was sleeping.
Right, got it.
What is 6, 7, 8-year-old going to think?
Right.
You can't wake mommy up.
Well, and I wasn't sure if Dad had said, "Oh, that's mom's passed out," and no, nothing. So it not talked about before the divorce?
No.
Oh, okay.
And even though I knew at a young age that her drinking from the special cabinet meant she was going to change her personality in some way. I didn't understand what that was. I knew when she drank from that cabinet, something that I didn't like happened. Either she fell asleep and didn't wake up, or she got angry and beat us with the wooden spoon. Those things that occur when you have an alcoholic in the family.
So you didn't know what to expect. And
No.
and you knew what it was like without when she didn't go to the special cabinet, but the special cabinet meant you don't know what's coming next.
Correct. And on top of that all, she was a epileptic. So she was taking, back in the 70s, phenobarbital, which mixed with alcohol is bad. And she would go into grand mal seizures. And I was at the age of 5 learning how to take the handle of the wooden spoon and place it on her tongue so she wouldn't swallow her tongue. So at a very young age, I was mothering my mother.
Yeah.
So we get to New Mexico, and that's not the trauma yet. We haven't gotten to the trauma.
Right.
We get to New Mexico. She's drunk. She's passed out. She's partying with friends, so they're all passed out. And I go to bed. My sister's already asleep. And I believe they drugged her that night because she didn't wake up for 3 days.
Or your mom?
My sister, my 10-year-old sister. So I am checking, leaning on her, watching her chest go up and down, making sure she's breathing, monitoring her, that I'm hearing her heartbeat. And she sleeps for 3 days.
Were you terrified?
I think I completely shut down my emotional aspect of things and was working on, okay, how do I get to the next day?
Yeah.
So she's asleep, or what I think is asleep. And I wake up with a gag in my mouth, my feet tied, and somebody holding my hands down. And it ends up that 3 Hispanic men rape me while my mother is standing in the room watching so she could have drugs.
I just want to say right now, as I'm listening to this story, the feeling that I'm having is I want to vomit, and I couldn't imagine being there. So did you have any feelings in that moment? Were you just terrified? Did you freeze? What happened?
Well, number one, I didn't remember my mother was standing in the room for 4 years.
Oh my gosh.
That's how traumatic it was, that my 11-year-old brain could not handle the knowledge that my mother was standing there watching this. So I didn't know that, or I didn't remember that until 4 years later. So in that moment, I remember thinking I didn't do anything wrong. I did everything I was supposed to do. I locked the bedroom door when I went in. Everybody was outside. So I knew that somehow I was going to try to blame myself for this, but I knew in the moment it wasn't my fault. Mm-hmm. I knew when it was all over with and they left, everybody left. There was nobody left in the apartment. And my mother didn't come back until she was missing for 3 days.
So you're the only one there, and your sister is sleeping, and mom...
I'm the only one there.
She's gone.
Just me. So my mother's gone. My sister's sleeping. When my sister, she's very upset because my mom's not there. And yet at the same time, I'm trying to take care of her. On the 4th day, my mother returns. And she comes home like she was working. We had this little routine where she gave me her paycheck and I would go to the grocery store and cash the paycheck, get a money order to pay the weekly rent. She took the groceries. My sister and I went and paid the rent. When we got back to the apartment, my mother was standing out on the front stoop with our suitcases on the ground and told us it was time to go home, went back into the apartment and locked the door.
You're 11. Your sister's 11 months behind you to the day. And I just can't imagine what that felt like to you. What were you thinking with the suitcases on the front porch and you and your sister standing there?
Well, my sister immediately started crying. And This is where the brain and the ego are amazing things. So the last thing my dad said to me as we are getting ready to go visit my mother is he lifts up my chin and looks me in the eye and says, "You take care of your baby sister." Now, there's all kinds of good things and bad things about that statement to somebody that is 11 to a 10-year-old. Yeah. But for me, in that moment, my ego kicked in and said, "You must take care of your baby sister." And because of that, then I started down a completely different path than probably what I would have done had I been alone. And I had not had that directive to take care of my sister.
Right.
So I started thinking, okay, I'm trying to calm my sister down. I asked her, we need to go to the police. We need to make a phone call. We need to call Daddy to have us come home because Daddy is in Pennsylvania. So I'm 3,000 miles away from the nearest real relative.
Oh, wow.
You know?
So were you also feeling very alone? First of all,
yes.
you've got to be adult and parent, and you're alone in a strange town because you've only been there for a couple of weeks. Mm. And on top of it, you've had this huge trauma happen. How did you even function? I don't even know if you could describe what happened.
I really think that what happened was my egoic mind took over and started saying, okay, let's logically find a place to call. My sister did not want to go to the police. And when she said, well, I don't want to go to the police, it clicked in me that, of course, I don't want my mother to get in trouble.
Oh, and again, yeah, it's mom.
I go back into that protective mode, that codependency that comes up into protect mom. So we get to my mother's friend's house, which is a mile away. So a 10 and 11-year-old are walking down the streets of Albuquerque, New Mexico, carrying suitcases. And it's a mile away. Nobody says anything to us. We get to this apartment and I call my dad. I don't remember all of the conversation. I remember telling him, we need to come home. We need to come home now. He asked me if I was in a safe place. He asked about talking to my mother and I said, no, she's not available to talk to. I don't think I said she kicked us out.
Right. So still protecting.
Yes. I don't think that came out till later. So he hangs up the phone with me, calls me back about an hour later, tell me there's plane tickets. Can we spend the night somewhere? Plane tickets aren't until 12 noon the next day. And this is like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon the previous day. I said, yes, we have a place. And he asked, can we get to the airport? And I said, yes, I have a way for us to get to the airport. And this is where I think spirit really, if we look at our lives, we can see that spirit or God or the universe, whatever you want to call it, you can see interfering in your life in a way that if in the time you don't think it's important. When we got to New Mexico, my mother's friend picked us up. He and her picked us up because my mother didn't have a car. So he had a car and he picked us up. He knew my mother and he took us out to dinner. We had a lovely time with him. His name was Alan. And he handed me his business card as my mom and my sister are going into the apartment. He hands me his business card and said, honey, if anything happens, you need anything at all, you call me. Alan is the one that took us to the airport.
Wow. What a blessing.
Never talked to him except for that day he picked us up. I called him. He said, absolutely, I'll be there. He came, he took us to the airport. I've never seen or heard from him again. So he is somebody that spirit absolutely knew I would need. And I recognized it as, okay, this is something I should hold on to. And I kept that business card because normally, why would an 11-year-old keep a business card? You don't.
No.
So I intuitively knew that I needed to have this information and I hid it away. And at the right moment, I took it out and used it.
So when you say hid it away, do you think you didn't even want your mom to know that you had it, that Correct. It was something sacred to you? Wow. I'm getting the chills because I think you're right. I think there are those moments in our life where things happen and maybe in the moment we're not paying attention or recognizing that it is what it, because it just seems so, I don't know, like we just dismiss it maybe. I don't know. Okay.
Everybody that comes into your life for a reason, either to bless you or to help you learn something. And if you approach that, every person that you come in contact with, universe sent for a reason, whether I'm the person that's supposed to bless them or they're supposed to bless me, or I'm supposed to teach them or they're supposed to teach me. There's always going to be that exchange, especially when souls come together. So we get on the airplane, we get off the airplane, and I walk up to my dad and I tell my dad, I don't say hello. I don't hug him. I say, I need to go to therapy. Now, again, I'm 11. I don't really think I knew what therapy was. Yeah. I knew that several things. I knew this was bigger than me. I knew that in some way going to be very impactful in my life, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And it took me a year to tell my dad everything that happened. And then, so I was in therapy for 5 years. Keep in mind, this was in the early 80s. therapy for sexual trauma really wasn't something that was handled very well. Right. Most children weren't in therapy anyway, so there wasn't a whole lot of child psychology going on unless there was an actual systemic problem that was diagnosed early on, but not traumatic type. I mean, an actual psychological break of some sort. Right. So because of that, I don't know that the therapy was very beneficial for me, except as a way to vent about other daily occurrences. So right. I learned to talk about those things that may aggravate me, but not ever about the trauma. I did talk somewhat about the abandonment, and ultimately that is my core trauma, is abandonment. The abandonment that my mother did, not only when we were little by passing out and me having to take over. She left my dad. That's what caused the divorce. So again, she abandoned us. The abandonment in New Mexico. And then ultimately in her death, she abandoned us again because she told, when she was in the hospital, she told the administrators of the hospital she had no next of kin, no family, no children. So again, she completely abandoned my sister and I in her final moments.
Right. And I'm thinking, when you said when you were little, when she would drink and pass out, that's an abandonment. Then when I heard you say about Albuquerque, when you were abandoned, but I think in Albuquerque, you were abandoned a couple of different times.
Correct.
Because of what happened in that room. And I think that for me, just thinking about standing there and not doing anything might be worse than kicking me out.
Yeah. Ultimately, one of the things that any trauma victim goes through is the why, all the why questions. And the why, if my mother and I ever had a conversation, an authentic conversation, there could never have been a why that I would have been satisfied with.
Okay.
Because as a mother, there's no way you put your child in harm's way. There's no way that you stand and watch your child be desecrated. It's not something that a mother allows to occur. So no matter any sort of why that could come out of because she couldn't, it's just, you can't justify it. In my mind, it cannot be justified.
I agree.
In my book, I talk about the fact that I gave up asking the why. And if people really want to know, if they really feel they need to have a why, the why was that she was an alcoholic and a drug user.
Yeah.
And she was addicted to a substance that altered her perception about everything, because her perception, she had to stuff in some way because she could never deal with the reality of what her life was. So she chose, as a way to deal with it, to bury it, to stuff it, not to feel it. And in doing so, put her children in harm's way.
So, which is devastating. And how did you let go of the why? How did you personally, how did you come to, I need to let go of this?
Well, I'm a very optimistic person. And up until the day I found out she passed, I always believed that deep down we would reconcile in some way. I so much believe that she got invited and came to my first wedding. After my son was born, he was 18 months old. I took him out to see her because I wanted her to be able to meet her grandson. Mm-hmm. It was the only time she ever met him, and she was sober for about 16 hours before she started drinking, and then he and I left. Oh. So, I was giving her opportunities. I was saying to her over the years, I'm giving you opportunities. If you're willing to stop the drinking, I'm willing to have you be a part of my life.
Yeah.
She was never willing to give up the drinking. So finally, after she passed, I realized that I was still searching for the why. Part of the reconciliation to me was understanding the why. And I was meditating one day and it occurred to me, the why doesn't matter because she was an alcoholic. She was a drug addict. She never took responsibility for her life and her actions. And because she never did that, she could never even try to come up with a why, because she never really could look into herself to determine, okay, what caused me to do this? Why did I make this choice? And why was the drugs more important than my child? And every day we make choices. Every day we decide what next step we're going to take. And even not choosing is a choice. Not doing anything is still a choice. If you have option 1 and option two, and you choose to do nothing, that's still a choice that you made. Yeah. So many people don't realize that there's a lot of power that we have in our choices. And that's one of the big things that occurred after I got out of high school and I was in college. I had a college friend tell me that I liked being a victim. And I had to sit with that for a while, because at first I got very angry. Who are you to tell me anything about my trauma? But something about it kind of resonated with me. Okay, what am I getting out of being a victim? When you're a victim, what happens? One of the things that happens is that people leave you alone. People are gentle with you. People don't want to trigger you. And so how people then dealt with me was very passive and very cautious, or they just left me alone. And I was okay with that. Yeah. When you suffer trauma and you don't know how to deal with it, and you're trying to figure out all the whys, why did it happen to me? What could I have done differently? All of that you go through. Part of that also is realizing that being left alone means you don't have to answer questions. You don't have to come up with lies to cover up stories and all of that. Being left alone is a good thing. And then I realized there was a better way to communicate to somebody that I wanted to be left alone. I could just say that instead of using all this victimology to keep people away. So the day I went from saying that I'm a victim of trauma to being a survivor of trauma, that major shift empowered me to start making choices without blaming others. So up until that day, everything that happened in my life could be blamed on my mother. Everything could be blamed on the abandonment. Everything could be blamed on the sexual abuse. Everything could be blamed on the codependency. So, all of the things in my life that I could make bad choices, I did not do well on a test because I was thinking about all this stuff with my mother. I could blame on all that. The moment I said, no, I'm a survivor, I need to take responsibility for the choices that I've made. If I didn't do well on a test, that is on me. It has nothing to do with my trauma.
Right.
And that's empowering.
It really is. It really is. And I want to round back real quick to, it sounds like you've come to accept, well, maybe not. I'm not certain that's the right answer, or the right word, but the mom did the best that she could. And that wasn't always what you needed, or most of the time, not anywhere near close to what you needed.
One of the things that all of us have to do when we look at forgiving others is really looking at two things. One, forgiveness is for ourselves. It's not for the other person. Okay. So forgiveness is for ourselves, for us to let go of the attachment, the negative attachment that we have with that person. But the other part of forgiveness is understanding that when people know better, they do better. My mother absolutely was not the mother I truly needed to have, or that I truly desired to have in my life.
Right.
She was absolutely not what Terri needed. Now, she was then, however, biologically my mother, and she was the person that I had to deal with. And I have had a lifetime to try to figure out the best way to deal with her. Some days I did well, so other days I didn't do well. But through all of it, being able to forgive meant that I had to understand that she had a traumatic life as well. And when people hear her story, they can understand why she was as messed up as she was. She was born 8 miles inside the Arctic Circle back in the 40s in a Native American tribe that was sustenance living. She had no running water, no electricity. At the age of 16, she was given up for adoption with her 2 younger sisters, and literally put on an airplane, left the village, and didn't go back for 40 years.
Wow.
She gets adopted by a missionary family who had no children, and they were abusive, and they also ripped away her culture. She wasn't allowed to be Native American. What she called moving into the white man's world meant that she had to dress like a white girl. She had to talk. She couldn't use, they have their own language, and she couldn't use the language. She had to speak English. So in the first night they spent there, we were playing with the light switch to turn the light on and off and watch the toilet water go down, because they had never seen anything like that. By the time she married my dad, she was an alcoholic. Because when your identity is ripped away from you, how do you cope? Especially when you're in an environment, this would have been back in the late 50s, in an environment where there is no, I mean, people think that she's lucky. She got adopted. She got taken away from that sustenance living. And for her, that wasn't the way she saw it. So that was the start of many things. She had been sexually assaulted, and then she was raped when she was in New York. And so she had sexual trauma throughout her life. So there were lots of things that she just never could deal with. But I really think for her, her core identity was ripped away. Who she authentically was, what she was told was bad. And when we are domesticated as children, we get relatively damaged. That's what causes our damage. So we are born to this world knowing exactly who we are. We are strong, we are fearless, and we are bold individuals moving towards living an authentic life.
I'm wondering what's going through my mind is I think maybe it's possible mom having those traumas and walking into that room triggered so much possibly for her. And there may have just been no possible way for her to even stop it. And then for me, I mean, I'm just trying to put myself in her shoes. I know that's not possible, but if I had been traumatized like that and then saw someone I loved, regardless of my alcoholism or anything else, being traumatized in the same way, I don't think I'd be able to handle that. In fact, I'm not sure I would ever come back from that.
And that may be it as well. You know, I have looked at that aspect of it, is the fact that when she was sober and she realized what happened, is that why she ran away for 3 days or for 4 days? You know, is that why she went away? Is that why she forced the abandonment, forced us to go home because she couldn't deal with what she did?
And while possible, doesn't change the fact that it's not helpful to you to know why. So you had to even let go of that wonder.
Yeah.
Wow. I think that takes a lot of courage and strength, because I think I'd want to keep investigating it.
You can only investigate so much before you come to the realization that really and truly to investigate the why of what somebody does, you can really, really never know. I can tell you why I did something, but ultimately you can't really know because you're not me. You don't have my experiences. You don't have my mindset. You don't have my fears. And the egoic voice that continually talks and screams at us, that tells us what we're doing is wrong or bad, or, you know, we should be doing something else. When we are struggling with trying to understand why people do what they do, ultimately it comes down to they did it. We can't change what they did. Yeah. And for us to live in the past and be fearful of the past means that we are in a constant state of depression, period. Yeah. And I was tired of being depressed. I was tired of living in the past. When you live in the past, then you don't have a present, and your future is non-existent because you're always stuck in the past. So for me to move forward, I had to start looking at different ways I basically went from looking back and being fearful of the past and depressed to looking to the future and being anxious about the future, because ultimately my fear changed slightly. It was still fear. It was still the core abandonment issue, but now looking at the future, everybody's going to leave me.
Oh, yeah. So you had to shift.
Correct.
Because if you didn't, everyone would leave you.
Correct.
Because you were constantly in this learned helpless victim role.
Well, not only that, but I automatically assume things. So, for example, you have a baby. My son is born. I'm holding him in my arms, and I'm looking down at him thinking, oh my God, he's going to leave me. That is not something that most people think about. Most mothers think about when they're holding their newborn baby for the first time. But that's how deep that abandonment issue was in me, is that even something as natural as raising a child became about my abandonment issue.
I think my question is, did you start feeling desperate or panicked as soon as you had your son, or what? It just was this, at some point he's going to abandon me.
Literally, I'm in the hospital holding him, and that thought comes into my head, oh my God, he's going to leave me. And I don't think that I dwelled on it in that moment. I mean, I realized what it was. And part of the fear that I had, I think, stemmed from the circumstances in which he was born. So do you remember the movie Switched at Birth? I watched it 2 weeks before I delivered, number one. Number two, I had a very difficult delivery, and he was 3 weeks late. He was almost 10 months old. I was 10 months pregnant when he was born. They had to induce labor. There was meconium in the water. So neonatal was there. So literally they threw him on my stomach. I saw him and they took him away.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Switched at birth. So, dad went with the baby, and it took almost 4 hours for me to deliver the placenta. So I had complications. There was all kinds of issues. So in those hours that I'm dealing with my issues and the baby's safe, I get the baby and I have that abandonment thought. But the other thing is, what all new expectant mothers do is they read Dr. Spock's book. And his book tells you how vital those first couple hours after being born is.
Oh, no. So you're feeling that like a failure already.
Connecting with the baby and bonding with the baby. And I never felt that. So for me, the connection that I thought I was supposed to have with my child never occurred. Now, my son is 29 years old now. When he was 18 and getting ready to go off to college, we had a conversation. And one of the things I asked him was, did you ever feel disconnected from me? And here's my opportunity to see, where I was in all of this now that he actually is leaving, and I want him to leave. So, he's getting ready to go. And he looked at me really strange and said, of course not. Mom, if anything, you loved me too much. So he never felt what I was feeling. So for me, that whatever that disconnection feeling was, he never felt. And that to me was ultimately how I got over that abandonment issue that I had concerning him, was that if he didn't feel that there was anything lacking, then I did okay.
Yeah. So it sounds like you were in college, you realize your friend calls you out on being a victim. Then still, when you get married, I'm not sure how many years later that is, you get married, you get pregnant, you have a baby, you're still worried about abandonment. I'm thinking there's a whole bunch of this journey of processing that happened from the time your friend called you out and the time you had your baby, and then having your son triggered some of those emotions again. What are we missing in that middle part?
From the time that there really isn't a lot in that middle part, other than I literally went from depressive state to where I'm now taking anti-anxiety meds because I'm having panic attacks during college. I was only in college 3 years. I'm an overachiever. So I actually completed my degree in 3 years. And at the end of the 3 years, I got married. A year later, I had a baby. So I was 21 when my son was born.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So literally 10 years after I was traumatized, my son was born. And in that 10 years, what I say is the first 10 years of my life, I was authentically me.
Right.
And the next 10 years of my life, I was conforming, I was domesticated, and I was conforming to what others wanted me to be. The peer pressure, what my parents wanted me to be, as far as, despite the trauma, they wanted me to be okay. They wanted me to function. All the things that parents want when there's something that they think is very disconcerting about their child, that they want their child to be okay. So I went through 10 years of that. Then I spent 20 years of being not quite sure who I am.
Okay.
And when I hit 40 is when I realized I don't like who I am. I don't think I'm really who I'm supposed to be. And at the age of 40, I started exploring that. The other big aspect of this is, up until I was about 28 years old, I didn't feel safe. So from the time I was 11 until I was about 28, I did not feel safe.
But you're married.
I'm married.
And you're not feeling safe in that relationship?
So Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about being able to live, so having food and shelter and clothing, and then the next level is safety.
Right.
I never felt safe. And what I mean by that is if there was a strange noise, or I can be home and a crowd of people, and if I heard a strange noise, I'd have an angst and everything in me would start shaking. And I was just always fearful, never felt safe. When I met my current husband, I couldn't figure out what it was. It was about 6 months when I realized, oh my gosh, I'm not scared. Because I went so long, over 15 years, where I didn't know what safe felt like.
Right.
When I became safe and I realized that in his presence, I was safe. And ultimately, I ended up marrying him. And because of me feeling safe, I could move on to the next level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And you can't do that. You can't get past any of the other stuff that comes up as you go through trauma if you don't feel safe. And a lot of people get stuck in the not feeling safe. I know of another lady who was she was raped in college and still to this day doesn't feel safe. And she's stuck in this place. And she's lived a very successful life, has been married, successful marriage, has had a successful career, but still she doesn't feel safe. And when you don't feel safe, you can't do the other things that Maslow's hierarchy needs talks about. So there is no self-actualization. There is no self-awareness when you don't feel safe. So I'm 28 and I feel safe. And this is when I really start to uncover certain things about myself that are not quite right.
Okay.
So what I call the thorny blanket, when we are traumatized, we wrap ourselves in a little cocoon in our blanket. And the blanket's painful. There are thorns in the blanket that have pierced our skin. And these are the self-defense mechanisms that we don't really realize we put into effect, that our ego puts into effect for us, especially if it's childhood trauma. I didn't know what a self-defense mechanism was. I mean, what is that? An 11-year-old doesn't know that. But those things that the ego uses to keep us safe, so that when you start healing, other things occur. So I started thinking maybe I needed to take off this thorny blanket. And as I took it off, a couple of things happened. I started oozing in some areas. I started scabbing in some areas. And guess what? Healing hurts.
Yeah. So explain what that oozing and scabbing was for you. What were you noticing in your life?
What I realized was there were certain things that I was a control freak. When you are completely out of control, and then you have to take control of a traumatizing situation, giving up that control means that there's going to be chaos. So I'm a natural control freak. And for lots of people, that can be problematic. But in some areas, it comes off as being a great organizer. I can organize people and things and put in systems and where everything works smoothly. But it's because I'm a control freak, because I want to be ultimately in control of all the pieces.
Right.
And so giving up that control is very hard. And being in control all the time is very tiring. There is no self-care. There is no taking, I literally, my appendix ruptured and forced me into bed with peritonitis for 8 weeks to get me to rest.
Wow.
Because your body will take on the different aspects of the trauma for you, and it will come through your body. Your body is part of your soul's essence that it uses to help us heal and trigger things so that we pay attention to ultimately what our soul is saying. So that was one of the things that was oozing. I tend to what my husband labeled the hammer of truth. I wield the hammer of truth. Basically, what that meant was if you asked me a question, instead of pausing and providing you an answer in a way that is best suited for you to hear, I would just clobber you over the head with a very blunt statement. Was it the truth? Yes. Could I have said it in a way that you would have been more receptive to it? Absolutely. So learning tact. I didn't have any tact. I said it like it was. And I still do that, but now I pause a moment and make sure that whatever words come out are compassionate for the person to hear versus me just clobbering them with over the head.
And it sounds like that still took you a little bit of time to work on. And I'm wondering, I'm just taking a gander here, but I'm thinking it might show up every once in a while still, where you say something and then all of a sudden you're like, oops, I wasn't thinking about how I was going to say that this time.
It's interesting. Again, the universe moves in mysterious ways. So I was heavily involved in a church from the time my son was about 2 until my son was 6. And then we moved. And actually, I take that back. I was involved in church since high school and then got taken out of it when my son was 6. And into nothing at all church related. So when that occurred, I started exploring other aspects of spirituality versus religion. Because I still knew that there was a God. I still knew that the spirit was there, and I still felt all that, but I did not have a structure anymore. So I started looking at other things. The other thing that happened, though, was I ended up getting involved in Cub Scouts. And in doing that, I volunteered, and I could say I'm a professional volunteer because I did it there and I did it later on in life. But for me, part of that was being able to work with other personalities, work with other people, learning tactfulness. And that's how the universe got me to start seeing people and the good despite the bad. I'm very good at being able to meet new people and determine, oh, they'd be really good at this. They'd be really good at that. And if I am in an organization and I meet them, I can bring them into those areas that they're going to thrive in versus putting them in areas that they're not going to do so well. So I'm able to see that opportunity. And again, when you're tactful with people, you get a lot more out than you do when you clobber them over the head. So the sledgehammer of truth is not necessarily something that is problematic anymore. Me, however, pausing and making sure that what I'm saying is compassionate still has to occur. I still have to take it back because there are lots of times I just want to override what people are saying. And that is my ego versus my heart.
Right. Wow. So your son was 6, you left the church, you remarried it when your son was 7, I'm thinking? Okay. So when he was 6, but when he was 7, you started feeling safe. So how did you know you were safe? What did you feel? Was it that maybe your husband had the integrity to say what he meant and do what he says? Could you pinpoint what that was? Or did you just know I feel safe enough to open up and figure out what's going on?
It was a twofold process. Number one, my husband listens, and that is not a quality that a lot of men really truly have. He listens and then he will comment, which meant he truly did actually hear what I said. Because I can talk a lot, and yet people don't actually hear. That's part of society's one of the biggest problems it has, is that you hear all this jibber jabber, but nobody's actually listening to what people are saying, because any anger that comes out, people get defensive, but that underlying anger is pain. And you have to listen to the person to get, and with compassion, to get to the place where you can understand their pain. And once you understand their pain, then their anger is justifiable for them. And then you need to be compassionate and work through that. So for me, he listened, but more importantly, he actually seemed to understand where I was coming from, and that my trauma, even though I said I was a survivor, because at that point I was, that he understood that it still affected me in some ways that I didn't quite realize yet.
But that's safe enough, and him knowing that, I mean, gosh, this guy sounds amazing. Where'd you find him? No, but the fact that he could hear you, understand you, and it sounds like on some sense, know that you still had processing to do and be okay with that. In that you had freedom is what I think is what you're telling me.
Right, because for me, part of the other thing is the safety I felt was there was not this consistent angst in me that I was defensive. So when your hackles go up, my hackles were always up. So my hackles were up for almost 15 years. So when all of a sudden my hackles weren't up, like, what is this?
But did it feel weird?
It felt weird because I was so used to always being terrified and always being fearful that not being that way felt weird. So that was really, I realized, okay, there's something about him that my soul is calming. My ego is calming down. My ego knows I'm in a safe place. And that's pretty amazing because your ego is always on the defensive.
Yeah. So your soul is knowing this. And at the same time, did it just feel weird? And how did you get over that weird, that uncomfortable, weird feeling?
Because when I wasn't in his presence and the fear came back, I didn't like it. So the juxtaposition between being afraid and not being afraid. And when you actually can tell and feel that difference, why would anybody want to be afraid?
Yeah,
because I don't read horror. I don't watch horror because life is horrible enough. I don't want to spend my free time with those imageries. And I had lived a really horrific life from that point. So not wanting to be fearful and wanting to feel like, oh my goodness, I can just relax. I don't have to be all ready to, pounce or attack or whatever, defend myself. I can just be. And when you feel safe and you can just be is when you find out, oh God, I'm really screwed up.
So it's just like this not even eye-opening, but soul-opening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of, I've got some stuff I've got to deal with. Now, instead of the blanket being thorny, it's warm and cozy because as you shed the thorns or pull each little thorn off, if you will, or maybe you just change blankets. I don't know.
Well, let me put it this, the metaphor I use is part of the thorny blanket is because pain of healing is still pain. Okay. When somebody has a cut, you have to treat the cut and it scabs and all this stuff. And there's some pain, there's tingling involved, there's feelings involved in that. Yeah. And new feelings, new pain is uncomfortable. We don't know what it is. So a lot of people put the thorny blanket back on. So I was doing that. I was taking it off and then I was putting it back on. I was taking it off and I was putting it back on. And then it got to the place where the thorny blanket was just too dang heavy. It was wearing me down. I was feeling lethargic about life. And I decided I just need to rip it off like a Band-Aid.
Oh, ouch. So what'd you do? How did you do that?
Well, what I decided to do was, I took it off, and at that point in time, I was very established in a specific area with my husband and my son and a community of people in the scouting realm. And I got very comfortable enough that I was okay exposing myself. Mm. And that's what real growth comes down to, is being able to say, you know what, if they don't like me, it's okay. If they don't like the fact that I have this gigantic scar, they're going to go away. I'm going to expose my gigantic scar because it is very much a part of me. And it was surprising. I did not lose many people at that point in my life. They all stuck around, which was important to me because all my abandonment issues that are going on, them sticking around was reinforcement that me being authentically me was a good thing.
And I think you, without realizing it, surrounded yourself with safe people. You, somewhere along the way, I think you learned and maybe it was with your husband and having your son, I don't know, but somewhere along the way, something happened and you learned what safe meant. Mm-hmm. And so when you get to this point in time where you're ready to rip off the blanket, you're validated because mm-hmm. of the previous choices that you made and what Creator, God, whomever you believe in, put in your life. What an amazing story. So what are 3 things that you could tell any of our listeners who may experience something similar or may not experience something similar to you, but 3 tools, 3 things that you want them to know so that they can still have hope?
Number 1, you are powerful. And you're powerful because you can make a choice. There's a choice that we all make every day, whether or not we get out of bed, whether or not that we put a smile on our face, whether or not we're thankful for the fact that we have a cup of coffee. Every day we have a choice, and we can choose to be happy or choose to be miserable. Why does anybody choose to be miserable when they can choose to be happy? And happiness is something that comes from within. Joy is a spiritual quality from our soul. It rises out of us. So that is something, same with peace. It's a spiritual quality in our soul that rises out of us. So we can have peace every day. We can have joy every day, but it comes from inside of us. So we're very powerful creatures with our ability to choose. Second thing I would say is learn to reframe your stories. What I mean by that is my story of trauma is very dramatic, very harmful, very sad, very painful. But my story of survivorship is hopeful and inspiring and helps other people. And by reframing how we tell our stories, reframing our self-talk is very vital in being able to switch our mindsets from being in pain and being in fear to responding from a place of love. And the third thing would be choose to respond from a place of love in all situations that you encounter. And the reason that's so important is if you come into a room with people that are arguing and you go into that negative energy and you also say, okay, I'm going to make this negative energy increase. And none of us think that. But if we go in with a bad attitude, or we go in that we're going to fight for whatever it is that we believe in, that negative energy, that's a negative energy. Instead of going in and saying, you know what, let me understand why they're so upset. The moment we ask, why do you feel that way? It changes the energy in the room. It changes how we're interacting with that person, because we're showing them love and respect. And the one thing we all want more than anything else is to be heard. Yeah. And if we hear somebody with authentic ears, then we are validating them as an individual. We're not agreeing with them. And that's right. What people think happens is that when we hear something that we're agreeing with it. No, you're hearing and validating the person and their feelings. Whether you agree with them or not doesn't matter. But that validation has now brought you both to the same table where you can share authentically with one another. And from that place of love, everything can be solved.
I think I really love that. And I think it's hearing them for where they're at for me is, and being okay with that, just being okay with where they're at. And like you said, their emotions are their emotions. Mm-hmm. And just because I disagree with their conclusion as to how to solve the problem doesn't mean that I have to make them sick, bad, and wrong. They themselves get to have that feeling, and I get to have mine. And as soon as maybe we realize we're a team, it's us against the problem, not us against each other, then we can start solving the problem.
That's it.
I am so lucky that I got to hear your story today. And I am so grateful to have had you on. I can't believe what you do. You have a story of hope. And it's not hope in little letters. It's great big letters.
It's a transcending story, which is why my book is titled Raven Transcending Fear. Raven is my clan. My Native American tribe is Athabascan, Tlinglet Raven clan. And so and not only is it symbolic for me personally, but the raven is the bringer of light to the Athabascan Indians. The raven is the bird that Noah used to release first. And the raven doesn't come back, but because the raven is so resourceful. The raven is used in the Old Testament as a symbolism of abundance. It's used in Greek and Norse mythology as the bridge between spirit realm and earth. So there's lots of things about the raven symbolism that I identified with, and that is where the raven comes from in the title of the book.
Well, I absolutely love it. I can tell you chose that name with care.
I did. The title of the book actually came to me before I started writing. I ended up with the title, and I ended up writing a poem And the poem is broken up into the 6 stanzas, which are the 6 chapters of the book. And then the book flowed from there.
Would you like to read the poem on air for the audience? You can say
Sure.
no, it's okay.
No, I have no issue. I just need to pull it up.
I happen to love poetry.
Okay, so I'm going to put it in a place where I can read it and kind of look at the camera. It's called Rebirth of the Raven. Raven, the bringer of light, intelligent, wise, persuasive, calm, knowing its purpose, confident and ready. Raven, betrayed and abandoned, overwhelmed, take on responsibility of others. Raven, lost and full of fear, protection removed, feeling alone in the darkness. Raven, covered by a thorny blanket, knows removal will cause pain, the pain from healing wounds. Help is needed, but fearful of following her heart and not her intellect. Raven quiets the voice of the ego to listen to the spirit she has forgotten. Calm, peaceful, whole, creative. Light has returned. Grandmother Moon at the start of the day, smiling down upon the earth to help Raven remember that all is well, that it will be a great day if she is aware of the miracles that are always present.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Terri, for being here today. We are so lucky to hear your story.
Thank you very much for having me, Angela. I enjoyed our time.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Relatively Damaged by Damaged Parents. We really enjoyed talking to Terri about how she overcame the fear and limiting beliefs caused by the childhood trauma she suffered. We especially liked when she taught us the meaning behind the title to her book, Raven, Transcending Fear. To connect with other damaged people, connect with us on TikTok. Look for Damaged Parents. We'll be here next week, still relatively damaged. See you then.